covenant in an altar at a wedding. Let's talk about that. Let's go forward.
And with the relationship part, like,
Mhm.
I thought, like, I had to grow with my relationship with God by, like, fully, not just when I was, like, at church, but if I was in the car, like, I start talking to God, because that's developing the relationship, and then there's times where, like, I'm talking, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't hear anything, so I'll open the Bible, and maybe I'll flip a couple pages before I actually find something.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
that helped me develop my relationship with God.
There's a theology term here I can throw in, and it's called rhema. It's a fancy word, but it means what you just said. A lot of times people ask, and I've done this all, how does God talk to me? Because you hear people saying, God talked to me. It's like, really? I mean, he's never really just audibly talked to me. There have been about 3 or 4 times in my life where he impressed so hard. Now, there's probably more than that I knew he said something. I couldn't hear it, but I heard it. So it does happen. It wasn't audible, but you knew the words. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was that time when he took me to Proverbs 31. I knew that it's that because I didn't know what it was. When he called me into ministry, he said something that I wouldn't have known. A time where he asked me to take on a project. You remember those times, but the reason that stands out is because there haven't been a ton of them. But there have been a lot of times where literally through the Bible itself, he has spoken words to me. And I have Bible passages that to this day I believe are calling passages of his, where he just keeps taking me to these passages. That is called a rhema. When you're preaching, you have to keep everything in context because God doesn't speak to a whole crowd out of context. You got to be careful with using a Bible verse and throwing it out there and making you think it says something weird. But in your daily reading, and maybe this is a good answer for the question about how do you start knowing what God has for you. If you just will spend time, 15, 20 minutes reading your Bible every day and just asking God, is there something you want me to see? Every once in a while, something will just jump off the page. Like, this is to you and you just know it. And
Personal revelation.
That's called rhema. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be in context of the verse. You know it's to you. Hema, maybe? I think so.
I had it all wrong.
An example of that is when I was called to youth ministry. I wasn't a minister. I was serving a lot in the church, but I didn't have any connections. And one time, the person who was speaking that day was saying, there's something new that God wants to do in some of your lives. He wants you to serve him in a new way. And I challenge you, not because it's magical, but just to pray for 60 days over this. And he said, again, it's not magical. I just wanted you to get you to pray about it repeatedly. I had this sense that maybe I'm one he wants to do something different than what I'm doing. So I was praying and praying and praying. About 3/4 through, I'm driving in my car. I'm listening to a Bible on, it was probably CD at that time. And Matthew 25, 35 through 40 came on. And it's where Jesus is talking about people who have served him by serving needy people. He's saying,
when you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me.
When you helped this person with
passage.
this food need, and you gave this person a jacket and a shirt and everything, and the people are responding back, when was I serving you? So when you were doing that, you were serving me. When you served the least of these, you served me. And I don't know how I knew, but right then I knew I was going to be a youth pastor. I pulled off the road. I started crying. I told Claire, I'm going to be a youth pastor.
I started crying because I didn't want to have to work at the youth.
No, she didn't want to at that time. And I don't know why I knew that.
But it was funny because God had told me, sitting in church one day, you're going to be working with middle schoolers. And I was convinced that he was talking to somebody else because he knew that I didn't like it when I was in middle school. I didn't like middle schoolers now. I work with preschool.
But it was that passage.
So,
and it had something to do with the fact that I perpetually struggle with I will serve anybody, but I do like to get noticed. Let's say that. I do have that struggle.
One of his needs is attention.
It is. I knew immediately that this was a group that could never do anything back for you. That's it.
Well.
Not in the way you're thinking.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
A lot.
I got a lot out of it in my own personal growth. I mean, I got to relive and pass some things in my own life by serving into them. But in terms of what you would think of, you're going to just do this for them. And I don't know how I knew that. And within a week, I got a call from somebody who I just couldn't even imagine that would have happened. They said, hey, we're looking for a youth pastor. Are you interested? over here. I didn't have any connections with anybody, and that happened. It was a bizarre situation. So that's what Rhema is. And I was just reading my Bible every day or listening to it, as I'm going. And
you have to be in relationship with God.
Yeah.
Through reading of the Word and through prayer. Yes, do you have some?
I was going to say that it is really and truly true. When he speaks, his sheep hears his voice.
Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm. He got us to that point, and now we're going to get married. And when we do, it's important to marry under a real covenant with real vows. Let's say that way. And let's go on to the next slide. I got kind of a picture of that. Maybe I do.
Is it going to do the weird thing?
Okay,
again?
well, go ahead and unweird it for a second.
Hold on. This.
Well, let me say this. I know people, and I've gone to weddings where people have had strange vows, where you're not really promising anything. You're just saying stuff like you're my this, that, and the other, and you're my one and only, and you're sweetie pie, and all those things. But they're not actually promising anything. They're not vows. They're poetic statements. Let's say.
Is this what you're wanting? Screen is just doing something weird up here. Maybe I can.
Okay. All right. Good. So the one in the room don't see it. So I'll have to describe this. That giant thing you're seeing is an altar. This is an Old Testament period altar. When you go and have a wedding, there are three things historically in a biblical marriage that are going on. And as I mentioned before, God made marriage. There's a whole movement right now talking about how, marriage is a contract, and it was a contract before it was anything. Guys, that's not true. You can track marriage all the way back to the Fertile Crescent area. Before there were contracts, people were getting married. That's where civilization started. People were getting married before there was contracts. Now what happens is money starts getting involved, and so contracts start happening. That's real life. That's why there are contracts today. Because there's money and property and things like that. But originally, that wasn't the intent. God's talking about merging two people's lives together. There's no ever going to end, so there's no reason to have a contract.
That's as we said. It's supposed to be a picture of our relationship with
him.
Yeah,
just anything. You have a marriage contract today.
Yeah, which can be ended by a court of law and a decree of divorce.
Yeah.
But that is not God's plan for this. God's plan is to be a picture of his relationship with us, which is eternal and never ending.
We took a vow in a church when we got married and gave vows to each other under God. We also signed a legal contract. To us, the vow is actually a more binding agreement.
Yeah. So the state of Georgia required us to have a marriage license, which we signed. But the real covenant was when we said our vows before God, led by the minister.
That's right.
And then I was married to Doug.
Oh yeah, right. The minister called
Isn't
me
that
Doug.
Weird? Yeah.
He knew us. He got nervous. I did that to somebody today.
Happened, but yeah.
I did that. I was facilitating a meeting today, and I called somebody the wrong name. And so it happens. So she married Doug, and we have it on film. So I had my out right there. I did it. She said, "Oh, I got the contract." So I guess it didn't. But when you get married, biblically, there's three things it involves. And the first thing is sacrifice. That's why there's an altar. And what you're sacrificing is your old self. You're dying to what you used to be. You're going and saying, whatever I was in my singleness, I no longer am. I'm joined to you. That's a bizarre concept to some people. I didn't fully
totally
understand
antithetical to what in popular culture today.
That's right. The reason why that matters, that I'm willing to die to my old self. By the way, now suddenly, when I said earlier, God's step toward marriage is that you're willing to give yourself up to Him, that's training. Because if you really are going to get married His way, you've already died to yourself, so it's okay. You're going to have to do it for sure to stay married, because you're going to have conflicts. And there's going to be times where the only way to get through that disagreement is to say, you know what? I died to myself. And I'm not going to be my single self in this conflict. What's going to be best for both of us? That's hard to do. But when you got God over, it's the least easier. You can go pray about it. What would you have me do? But you got to die to that singleness. That is the sacrifice. It's a big deal. Now, there's another sacrifice that happens if you're in a Christian marriage, and that is that you're taking Jesus' sacrifice on you. When Jesus went to the cross, He died for our inability to do that perfectly. There is no way I can tell you that we have not had embarrassing moments as a married couple when we did not do those pillars perfectly. But I can tell you this, God is living in both of us, and He has jerked us back and had us work through it because we gave ourselves to Him and accepted what He did. We couldn't call Jesus Lord if he hadn't done what he did on the cross. When he died for all of our lying, our cheating, all the stuff that we do, that I do, he died for that and said, I paid for all that. Now you can just be in a relationship with me freely and you can grow.
He hasn't cheated on me, y'all.
No, not on her. Just in general. Just a general person.
I don't think that.
I don't mean that. But he said, I died for all that. So you make me Lord and I'll live in you. And I'll help you do this better than you could on your own. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, how do you, when you've never had a figure of authority that you can trust in the natural life, God has to slough off all of the bad stuff and fill in the good stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Where you have to hang in there.
Yeah, and that's where the background that Rob came from, where it was a bigger struggle for him.
Yeah.
Especially in our early years of marriage, because he hadn't had those earthly relationships.
I feel bad about that because I know Jesus died for me.
Yeah.
But my trust thing was so broken. It's still broken.
Yes.
And it's like, is there still time for me?
Yeah.
For love. That's where I am.
There's no time that's too late for him.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something he did for us in a minute that helped me get through that. I'd never had anybody commit to me like this, like I was being asked to do in a marriage. Nobody had. I will tell you this, though. I have learned how to put it in a different context. Fortunately, I'm not in that context with my wife. But it's your trust in God that will help you deal with untrustworthy people. I have worked for some very untrustworthy people in my career. I am now working for some very trustworthy people. So if anybody sees this, I'm working for you. But I have had times where I have worked for people I could not trust, but I could trust God. When I took my decisions to him, daily, hourly, I would stop and say, how can I make a decision that would honor you, God, in this situation? And he carried me through that. I thought for sure when we first had Braden and I was dealing with all that, our son, and I was in a terrible situation in my work, and I thought for sure I was going to be out on the street anytime. Every hour I was praying that. Not only was I working for someone who was really scary and people were afraid of, I had people who were doing what you call throwing people under the bus all around you. That's a good corporate term. You don't see that bus, but sure enough, people are being thrown under it all the time.
Marks,
and usually that's what happens when you're under a scary person. People get scared and they start throwing people under the bus. So this is happening left and right. And I got set up hard to facilitate a business planning meeting. Just real quick, to go off topic, just so you can trust God even when you're around untrustworthy people. I got set up, all right, by somebody who was my boss. Did not tell me that's why I was going to go to this meeting with this VP to do that. Just said, I want you to go to this meeting. I had never facilitated a meeting in my life in a workplace at that time. That wasn't my job. Well, I went in and we were there for a couple days and I'm taking notes and everything. I don't know, it's just chaotic meeting too. And this VP is getting mad at everything going on. Anyway, afterwards, he talked to me and said, well, why do I need you? I didn't even know who he was. What do you mean? Why do you need me? Well, you didn't do anything that you were asked to do. And I thought I was going to get fired right there. So what I did is I prayed about it. I was so mad at the person who had set me up too. But I prayed about it and thought, what should I do? What should I do? I got this sense of what would be the most humbling thing to do. It's just to be honest and transparent. But don't put anybody else under a bus. Don't say anybody set you up or anything. I called this person that everybody was terrified of, who had then said, I don't need you. And I said, I want to apologize for letting you down. I misunderstood why I was there. But if you'll give me one chance, I would like to show you that I can be valuable to you. And he said, okay, I'll give you a chance. I was the only person who got along with that person for the next 3 years. I did not say anything about the person who set me up, and I did not say anything bad about anything. I didn't try to talk my way out of it. I just trusted God in it. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but it popped in your head.
God is so much bigger than we think he is too. we oftentimes we try to make God as small as the people around us, and people around us are going to break our trust, and they're going to hurt us because we're all imperfect, and we all, as much as we try to, in our best moments to be for other people, we still have this selfishness in our sinful nature. But God is not like us.
Right.
God is above us, and God is ultimately trustworthy, and we just sometimes have to remind ourselves that God is bigger than all this mess around us. God is bigger than me and all of my selfishness. God is bigger than this person who is hurting me and breaking my trust. God is bigger than this person in my past that never taught me what earthly trust looks like. My God is faithful. My God can be trusted with everything. He is so much bigger than we are, and we can't put him in a little box because he is busted out of that box.
That's right.
And it's overall.
So that's the first thing. He's asking us to go all in. Leave our singleness totally. That, to me, in couples we have worked with, that's been the number one challenge, is somebody has not left their singleness. Somebody said, I'm going to try to be a single person married. And it's hard. It is. I mean, we all kind of do that. It's even after 25 years, daily part of it is a choice. You start to see more and more how worthy it is, but you still have to choose to do it sometimes. The second part is sanctification. That's the second word on here. That's a fancy word that says there are unclean things that each of us take into a marriage because we make mistakes in this life. And we can leave it. That's why there's an altar. I didn't know this when I first got married, an altar, but that's why there's one there. It's because you leave it there. And so you're clean now. Because one of the scariest things our culture does, I think now, is try to lure people into lots of things, especially sexual things, that are going to be really harmful to marriage. They lure you in, oh yeah, come do this, and then once you do, then they condemn you for it. Say, well, don't touch that person anymore. It's evil. It's the worst place to be. There's so many people who feel like, well, I fell for it, or didn't even get tricked into it. It seemed like a good thing to do, but now I can't marry anybody. Or someone would say, well, you couldn't marry them because they've had this background, that background. But that's why there's an altar. There's no such thing as anybody who can't get married as a new person, no matter what. That's why there's an altar there. Now, you have to mean it. You have to have done what I did and get down on your knees and say, help me leave this behind. Because there's things that it does to you, and you got to unlearn those things. But God's willing to help you through that. That's the great thing about it. That's his kind of marriage. You can leave anything and enter in feeling like you are a good partner for this person.
You are worthy.
You're worthy. And the last thing is fidelity of the will. On the slide it says agape love. Love as a will, not as a feeling. That's what marriage is. The feeling's going to come and they're going to stay as long as your will is that I choose to love you from now on. I choose to do for your best from this day on the days I feel like it and the days I don't. That is not the kind of love that's on a Hallmark card. It isn't. We buy Hallmark cards.
Have you guys, you ever look in the card rack, and if you're looking for, somebody that that's getting married, or anniversary cards or things like that, they all say, I can't remember now. What is
Well, it's just basically, I love what you do for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is. It's a long way of saying, I love all the stuff you do for me.
Yeah, I love how you make me feel, all these things about our feelings.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not a weirdo. I'm not going to say don't buy a card. I buy cards.
No, we buy
cards.
Yes.
Just the commitment that God is asking you to have is, I am going to choose that from this day on, I'm going to give you my love when I feel like it and when I don't. And
sometimes I don't like him very much.
Right, but I'm still going to love you. Yeah.
I always love him.
You know what's neat about that too? God knows. This sounds like, to someone who doesn't start to have a relationship with God, that sounds like torture. But it's not, because it's something powerful that Jesus said. He said, where you make your treasure, your heart will go. That's what he means. If you will focus on giving love to someone, you will love them more. And your feelings will continue to grow for this person over time. If you think about your favorite toy you had when you were a kid, like your first toy, it didn't do anything for you. But you love that thing because of what you were doing for it. It's a weird analogy for marriage, but my point is, I have found that my love for my wife has grown the more I have given it to her, rather than trying to take something out of her, if that makes sense.
It's serving, like we said. It's giving to one another. And when you give to someone, then you appreciate them more and you see more their value, because you're doing what you can to make them a better person. They're doing what they can to make you a better person. Everybody's getting better.
Yes. Woo, that's big there. Here's the question. So you guys in the room can't see this, but on the Zoom you can see it. On the left side is a vow, like a traditional marriage vow. I, so-and-so, take you to be my husband or wife for this day forward, for better, worse, rich or poor, sickness, health, to always love and cherish you until I part with you in death. There's a lot of promises in there. That's why it's a vow. I've heard people say, well, I can't promise something I don't know I'll feel. That's exactly why you promise it.
That's the point.
Because you're not going to always feel it.
I definitely don't always feel it.
You promise to do it. I'm always going to do this, no matter what.
Love is an act of will. Love is action.
Yeah, it's
feeling
right.
is shallow.
When you are in a major conflict, which do you think is going to help you stay together in a relationship? This one on the left or the one on the right where it says, you're my Chewbacca to my Han Solo, just less hairy? That's somebody's marriage vow. What do you think is going to be more useful?
Left.
Yeah. I mean, nothing wrong with Star Wars weddings. I had a friend who had a Star Wars wedding. That's great.
We had Godzilla in our wedding, so
yeah, we had a Godzilla in our wedding, but we had a marriage vow.
But we had the marriage vows from this day forward.
That's right.
With Doug.
So that's the important thing, that you're making a real vow, a real promise. You're at an altar. I'm not saying you have to be in a church, but wherever you are, think of that place as an altar where you're leaving behind anything that is going to be harmful to the marriage. And you say, I'll let God have that and let him renew me. And you're leaving your singleness behind.
It is a covenant before God.
Yeah.
Witnessed by men, in which you're not going to be able to fulfill all the parts of the covenant in your own strength. You are going to have to depend on God to fulfill it for you.
That's right. That's right. And this is the tool that we showed before. It's in giant in the screen here. It's the conflict level up tool. This is something, I use this at work even. This is one way to solve conflicts. That's a pretty, not an easy way, but a simple way. And that is this. If you have vows, if you have promises that you made to each other, or last time we talked about it's really important to marry someone who has the same kind of life values as you, those are things that are on a higher plane than whatever we're arguing about moment to moment, usually. What you can do is, sometimes we just cannot agree on something. But if we have things that are more fundamental that we can bring the conversation up to, it can help us to work through this. We made promises to each other in sickness and health. We're going to be true to each other. Those were vows that we made. Those are pre-decided. So whatever we're having a conflict about, if there's one of those we can level up to and say, okay, we're having trouble with this, but is there some promise we made to each other that's a higher level thing? And we'll take it up to that and say, what would best be in the spirit of this?
Yeah.
And that's what we'll do.
Sometimes couples have struggles with their parents, like in-laws or outlaws or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when you're in a marriage, you're having a disagreement about his parents, my parents, whoever's parents. We level up to, the Bible says we're to forsake all others. We're to leave our mother and our father. It's about our relationship first. So that is our priority. So we're then taking our parents out of the picture. We're leveling up to our relationship, prioritizing that.
Where that comes from is that is the marriage covenant, is a man and woman will leave their parents and cleave together. It doesn't necessarily mean you're leaving their home, although back in that days it is. It meant your parents or whoever else is no longer the primary influence person in your life. This person is.
Which is why the father gives the bride away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's really hard. A lot of times, especially early on in a marriage, couples will have an argument and they'll think, well, I don't know if this marriage is really going to last, but I know my friendship's going to last, and I know, so I'm going to listen to what they say more than this person. That is backwards. And it's a disaster, because as soon as you start thinking that, as soon as you start thinking there's an out,
yeah,
then
on the
there's
other
an
end
out.
of that, even with your children, you know, your marriage, our relationship is still our priority.
Yeah.
We care for our children and we do everything that we possibly can, but we still have to prioritize our relationship. You know, our goal is for our children to grow up and leave home and begin families and lives of their own. So we have to maintain our priority of our relationship, and that does two things. It keeps our relationship focused and healthy, and it shows our kids a picture of what a healthy relationship looks like as well.